Hello Flosstube friends, thank you so much for joining me for another video. Today's Stitch With Me video is going to be all about variegated flosses. Now I every once in a while get a question regarding my technique using variegated flosses. I think there is an assumption that I stitch differently with variegated flosses than I do with solid colored flosses, and it's just not true. So I have chosen 3 different threads to do this demonstration for you today. I'm going to stitch with each color in the Danish style and then stitch again with each color in the English style. Now I have talked before on several different videos about how I very infrequently stitch in the English style. It's only really when I have to, when I'm forced to stitch each cross completely individually, that I do it. But otherwise I stitch in the Danish method if I can. Now, you may recall that Erica of Fibers and Floss Canada put out a video about a year ago talking all about variegated flosses. I will link that below. I did just watch it again a few days ago to refresh my memory. In that video, she talks in depth about different ways that you could cut your variegated flosses, how you may want to use them in projects. She talks about using 1 strand versus 2. I'm not going to get into all of that today. That's really not what this video is about. This video is really just to show you how I do it, and you can take it or leave it. So I am going to start off with the most highly variegated color, which is Maritimes. Now, as I have said before, as I've said many times in the past, use your variegated flosses, use any of your materials however it suits you. I'm going to go ahead, it's already cut, so I'm going to go ahead and pull 1 strand from this skein and we'll see what we get. If you're interested to know how I cut these skeins of flosses, I will link below my needlework tools video. In that video, I show how I cut a skein of floss so that I get equal lengths of thread and then put them back on the card. I'll link that video and I'll put information as to where in the video you can find it. All right, you may be able to see that in this 1 strand, we've got greens, golds, and red within just this 1 strand. I am working today on an off-white 32 count for my stash. Now, normally if you're stitching on 32 count, you're probably going to want to use 2 strands. I'm using 32 count today because I figured that would give me larger X's, which would be easier for you guys to see on camera. And it's a nice off-white color, a nice bright color. Now I have the camera right between my face and my stitching, so it's going to be a little difficult for me to get started here. I'm actually going to pull this toward me just a bit so I can find my starting point. Okay, so I'm going to start in that hole right there. Now many of you know that I start with a little tail and then I secure that tail as I go. So this is an extremely dramatic variegation. It's not just a change in one color family, it is a change from different color families into others. Greens, reds, blues, golds, all within a single skein. So if I were stitching a large area, like block stitching, if I were going to do block stitching with Maritimes, I may not stitch completely in the Danish method. But I'm going to go ahead and do that right here for you, just so you can get an idea of what it would look like if you did. And we're going to move over. Let's see, I've already put in 5 stitches, 6, let's do 8. I think that would be fine. But look at that, even just in 8 stitches, we're going from sort of a medium red to a salmon, now back to a bright red. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think that's fine. Hope you guys can see it all right. If you are watching on anything other than a television, you will be able to pinch and zoom if you like to get a closer look at the stitching. I love the colors within this skein. So I did actually purchase 2 skeins of this when this new color was released. And again, that's Maritimes, and Roxy Floss Co. flosses are available from Evertote.ca. They are based in the London, Ontario area. All right, we've got 1 row done. Let's take a look at that. I hope you can see, it looks as if the top legs are a bit brighter than the bottom legs. Let's go ahead and do another row. So again, stitching in the Danish method means that in an area of block stitching or in a row, you're going to lay down all of the bottom legs first. So make half crosses one way and then complete the crosses going back the other way. I get questions sometimes also about my hoop and why I use it the way that I do. Some people say that it looks like it's backwards or it's inverted. You can actually use it either way. I choose to place my linen in the hoop this way because when I flip it over, the linen will then be flush against the hoop and it's much easier to bury tails, secure thread if the linen on the back is flush against the hoop. If you have questions about the hoop that I'm using, the needle that I'm using, the stand that I'm using, again, please refer to the All About Needlework Tools video. As I said, I will link that below. Within the description box of that video, there is information and, if possible, links to all of my favorite needlework tools. But if you haven't watched that video and you're curious about the different tools that I use, maybe you're just wondering what other needleworkers use, I would give that video a watch. It seemed like it was helpful and interesting to a lot of people, so I continue to recommend it. Okay, so we've got our second row done and it looks very nice. It's because we're still within the red family. We haven't moved into a different color family yet. The stitches that I'm putting down now, they're kind of going into salmon, orange, peach. But I still think it's going to be a little while until we get to the next color family. I mean, my guess as to the reason why a lot of people believe or are insistent that variegated flosses need to only be used in the English method is because they want to see the variegation on the piece change smoothly. But if that's not the look that you're going for, then feel free to use highly variegated flosses in block stitching areas in the Danish method. Okay, I think we're finally moving into a different color family here. So we've got that third row laid down, and now our salmon is kind of evolving into a muddled gold, and that's going to transition to green. You can see I had nice bright rich reds on top in the first row, and we're moving along. I do think this skein is absolutely beautiful. I was very excited when they announced that this was going to be a new color added to the regular catalog. All right, yes, it looks like we're now moving into the golden greens. I think the next row will be more overtly green. Now, obviously, if I were to stitch, instead of 4 rows of 8, 5 rows of 8, you know, a bunch of little rows of 8, if I had just stitched all the way across, say, 30 stitches and then 30 stitches back, then yes, it would look very different even than this. I think we're still getting pretty smooth variegation here, actually. But what I'll do after I've completed this row, and then maybe the next one, is I'll finish the thread, and then I'll pull a thread, hopefully from the same spot within the skein, and we'll start again with the red end and stitch in the English method. Now, I get questions as to why I use the Danish method. Why do I prefer the Danish method over the English method? Well, when I am laying down stitches, I see that my stitches laid in the Danish method are neater and more orderly than my stitches laid in a large area done in the English method. I have tested this and have abandoned the English method for this reason. When you lay down a row of half cross stitches going one way and then finish those crosses coming back the other way, your bottom legs are all formed the same way, meaning that in this row, all of my bottom legs, they're coming up at the bottom left, going down at the top right, all the way along the row. And then as I come back, my top legs are again formed all the same way. They're starting, they will be, when I get there, they will be starting at the bottom right and going to the top left. The tension is the same, the tension is even, and so you get neat little stitches. And when I form crosses individually, I feel like I'm competing in the holes for area as I'm completing that whole cross. And I don't feel like I have to do that when I am stitching in the Danish method. Okay, so we kind of moved past the green pretty quickly and got into what looks like a nice teal color. And now we are back into greenish gold. So you can see that the transition is not super smooth, but it does look rather nice. I think it looks quite nice. I hope you guys can see that. Yeah, so what I'll do is I will then just pull my thread up. I'm just gonna be done with that for now. I'm going to pull a thread from what I hope is the same spot. Let's see. This looks like the same thread that we started with. So I'm pretty confident I got this something from the same spot in the skein. Okay, so we're going to start again laying stitches from the red end. I'm going to start, let's start right next to it so you can really see it. So let's start here. And if you wonder why I wiggle the needle in that hole like that, it's so that I can easily see where I need to start. I do this after I've counted to a point. Like if you really have to count to a certain spot on your piece, I will count to where I need to go and wiggle my needle in the hole like that. and then count again. And if it was particularly tricky, oftentimes I will actually start the thread. Like I'll get to this point, I'll put in a couple half stitches, and then I will actually count again to ensure that I am starting in the right spot. Better to rip out just a couple half stitches and start again than to find later on that you've stitched an entire motif in the wrong area. Okay, now actually I realized, see, I'm doing this incorrectly for my demonstration. I'm supposed to be stitching in the English method for you. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so putting down whole crosses. There's that bright red, beautiful bright red again. On the website, on Evertote's website, they tell you what colors are actually used within Maritimes. So if you want to, I don't know, if you want to select a monochromatic piece and stitch it in Maritimes, but then have certain other areas seriously in just a more solid color, you could always select Maritimes and then select the colors that are within it. I don't remember any of the colors, but I don't want to give you wrong information, but I'll link the product page below so you can find this if you're interested in getting this thread. Okay, so it looks like, have we done 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That looks like it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, so we're gonna do one more. Okay, so you can see already how our top row on this little box is going to differ from our top row, how it does differ from the top row on the other box. This lighter X right here, it looks like a very pale pink or pale peach. You can see that lighter color fully because we've done a top leg in it, whereas over here, the lighter color was buried under the top legs of that brighter red. So really this is about how you want to manipulate the thread. What's important to you? Your method of stitching, like for me, I prefer to stitch in the Danish method if I can. Or do you feel more comfortable stitching with variegated thread if you are stitching one X individually? Do you feel like you're getting a smoother transition from color to color? But let's see, come on, okay. And again, I'm stitching on 32 count. So if you think this looks a little lacy, you feel like you can see some of the fabric between the stitches, that's because I'm using one strand of cotton on 32 count. Actually, I don't think the coverage is too bad. I'm kind of surprised. It wouldn't be my first choice. I do prefer to stitch with cottons on 40 count, but it's not so bad. Okay, moving on down to the third row. Getting into that nice salmon orange color. I think we're actually going to see a quicker transition here to the next color. Like we're gonna, and we may get an entire stitch in gold that we didn't see before. I've only used this Maritimes for a very small amount of stitching so far. I used it on an animal cracker that I completed not too long ago. Henny Penny, the large chicken from Stacy Nash, I created a very funky apron for her. And I used Maritimes for some of the back stitching on that apron. I also used it for some feather stitches. I incorporated a lot of specialty stitches into that apron. It was really fun. I think I used 9 different stitches in all. All right, taking a look at this, guys, what do you think? What's your preference? Do you prefer the stitches on the left or the stitches on the right? I think for this highly variegated one, the stitches on the right here, formed in the English method, they do look very nice. You get, in almost every case, a stitch that has a matching bottom leg and top leg, whereas that is not the case on the left. You can tell me in the comments below if you prefer to use variegated or solid colored threads, or if you prefer to stitch in the English style or the Danish style. What's your preference? There is a secret third method that nobody talks about because probably nobody uses. It's very wasteful, uses a lot of thread. So I don't think a lot of people use it. All right, and now we're into the blues, the teal. That looks very nice. Yeah, I think this looks good. And doing the zigzag pattern, the meandering pattern, going right to left, to right to left, I think it looks nice. I still don't enjoy this stitching as much as I did with the Danish method, but I think it looks nice. I still don't know what I'm going to do with this thread. I just bought it because I thought it was so pretty. Determined to find something for it. I think at the Evertote workshop, somebody, oops, sorry. I forget who it is, but somebody who works at Evertote has taken on stitching a model using Maritimes. It's a modern folk embroidery piece that was originally charted to be a monochromatic piece, but she's stitching it with Maritimes, and it looks really cool. Oops. Wow, when I stitch with 40 count or 46 or 56, I can just put my needle in the linen and push it up and it'll hold it for me. Not so much with 32 count. I keep pushing my needle up and expecting it to be held, but it just falls right through. This is just beautiful. All right, what do you guys think? I think that looks really nice. It's only 8 more stitches, so I'll just go ahead and do that last row. I would like to see just as many stitches done this way as the other way for a direct comparison. I really like stitching with variegated flosses. I've never used, you know, as I say, I only used this Maritimes for a very small amount of stitching in Henny Penny. But normally the flosses that I use, you know, I use a lot of Roxy Floss in different projects, but they are more subtly variegated. And that's why I pulled the other 2 skeins that I did, because they're going to be more representative of what you'll actually get if you purchase Roxy Floss or Weeks Dye Works, Gentle Art Sampler Thread, Classic Color Works, I've never used color and cotton. I've used all the other ones that I named, but I've never used color and cotton. But I imagine their hand dyeing process creates subtly variegated skeins as well. Maybe they've got some crazy ones in the catalog, but from what I've seen in photographs and on Flosstube, it's nice, subtle variegations. Okay, so that's what we've ended up with. You can see, as I pointed out before, we've got one stitch up there that pops out because both top leg and bottom leg are light in color. And then the bottom row, it seems like the first leg here was more of a green teal, still finishing up that color, and then there's gold on top. Whereas for this one, it seems like the bottom row is pretty much gold top and bottom. But I don't see a huge difference. So if you want to use your variegated flosses in a particular method, you know, stitching in a particular way, I think that you can do that. But again, this is only 8 stitches wide. So if we were to do a much longer line, I think the differences would be very great, much, much greater than what we're seeing here. All right, the next piece, the next color that I'm going to choose is this raspberry sorbet. Now, this is part of the one-of-a-kind floss club. So unfortunately, this is not available for purchase, but they do have other highly variegated flosses in the catalog. Now, the reason that I chose this one is because the entire skein, I would say, is within one color family. It's all kind of a raspberry pink color, but it does vary from light pink to very deep raspberry. So I think it's going to give us an interesting product. Let's see. I'm going to actually, to make this easier on myself, because I want to pull 2 pieces from the same section of the skein like I did before. I'm going to pull one, and then I'm going to immediately pull one more. That's how you do it. Once you've cut the skein into the lengths that you want and put them back on the card, it's very easy to pull a single piece off. If you are stitching with 2 strands rather than just one, you should pull from the same section, pull 2 right away from the same section, you know they'll match, and then place them together, place the ends together, you know, the same end to the same end, if that makes sense. You guys understand what I'm trying to say, even if I can't say it very well. All right, so we're gonna move down a little bit. Let's start here. Okay, and again, I need to secure my thread, and we will stitch in the Danish method. Since we've already been chatting for a little while, I am actually going to go ahead and speed this up for you guys and catch you at the end when I'm done with this section. Okay, as you can see, I am finishing up this row of the section stitched in the Danish method. And you can see a nice soft transition, I hope, from at the top, a darker raspberry to kind of a middling range raspberry at the bottom. Hope you can see that. So I'm gonna go ahead and load up my needle with the second piece of floss and secure that on the fabric. and stitch the next section in the English method. As you can see, I am finishing up the 4th swatch, the second one done in the English method, stitching all crosses individually as I go. I gotta say, even though this skein of this raspberry sorbet looks highly variegated, it looks like there are a lot of variations between, you know, within the skein, I don't think I see that between these 2 swatches, even though these 2 threads were from the same section of the skein. I don't see a huge difference between these 2 swatches. So over a large area, if you were doing a huge area of block stitching with this raspberry sorbet, I think you would get to enjoy all the different depths that come through in this skein. But just in this little section, I really don't see much of a difference. So again, if you prefer to use one method over the other, I think you could safely do that and still achieve similar results either way. So my guess, my educated guess, is that as I stitch the last 2 swatches, which will be done in Duck Duck Spruce, which is a subtly variegated skein of floss, our swatches, one done in the Danish and one done in the English, they will probably look pretty identical. So I'm going to go ahead and pull 2 strands from the same section of the skein so that we have a direct comparison. But I suspect that the results will be pretty much the same. So it's just a demonstration for you guys so that you can see, so that you know, yes, indeed, I do use the Danish method in stitching with variegated floss, and you can too. It's okay. It's okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get myself situated and then put in this first swatch. If you're wondering how to incorporate variegated flosses into your own cross-stitch pieces, I would suggest in plants and flowers, if you are stitching, you know, whether it's smaller plants and floral arrangements, flower motifs, or larger trees, I think greens and browns, of course, would be great colors to try and incorporate into things like that, but also animals. So a black cat isn't really the same color black throughout, right? So you can use variegated flosses to add some dimension to motifs and objects in your cross stitching that you wouldn't otherwise get if you used solid colors. Now, there's nothing wrong with using solid colors. I do it all the time. Many of the pieces that I have stitched are done in solid colors, and I think they look absolutely beautiful. But I do love the range, the movement, the variegation that I get with my Roxy Floss Co threads. But again, there are many different brands out there that offer hand-dyed variegated threads. If you can, try a few, see what floats your boat, see what you like best. And maybe it's something that you'll want to use more often moving forward. Now, as I expected, it doesn't look like there's a huge difference between these 2 swatches of Duck Duck Spruce. Again, the one on the left is done in the Danish method, and the one that I'm stitching right now is being stitched in the English method. So just take this information, do with it as you will. If you have already used, if you are already experienced stitcher with variegated flosses, then I'm sure you'll know what you like to do best, the methods you prefer to use. But for those of you who have been unsure about how to use variegated threads. I hope this has been helpful. Again, I will link Erica below. She is Fibers of Floss Canada here on Flosstube, and she did a video all about variegated flosses and how to use them about a year ago. So if you are interested in another stitcher's methods on how to use these flosses, you can check that out. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. You can also find me on Instagram at StitchStitchBead, or you can send me an email if you prefer to get a hold of me that way. But thank you so much for joining me. Again, I hope this was helpful, and very happy stitching.